Imagine this. You wake up one morning feeling a strange heaviness, an inexplicable sorrow that quietly whispers beneath the surface of your everyday life. You sit on the edge of your bed, staring at the floor, wondering why this familiar sadness returns to you again and again, always lingering just out of sight, yet strong enough to shape the subtle rhythms of your day. It's like a shadow you're vaguely aware of, a presence you feel, yet never fully understand. You've tried everything. Self-help books line your shelves, promising freedom, self-love, and success. You meditate, exercise, and chase meaning relentlessly. But no matter how much you change your external circumstances, your job, your relationships, your environment, that shadow remains. And the unsettling truth hits you. The shadow isn't outside you. It's deep within, rooted in a time you've long forgotten, yet has never forgotten you. What if the life you think you're living, the choices you believe you're freely making, are not truly yours, but echoes of an older hidden story? What if the fears you think you've conquered still secretly steer your decisions from the depths of your subconscious, where old wounds never fully heal? Could it be that your adult life, your very identity, is just a complex response to the child who once stood helplessly in a world they could not fully comprehend? Think about it. How much of your current anxiety is actually the voice of a younger self who never felt safe? How many of your relationship struggles secretly replay patterns you watched unfold between your parents, your family, or those who raised you? You strive for success, recognition, belonging, convinced you're chasing dreams uniquely yours. But are you really running toward a future you desire, or running from a past you don't even remember clearly? This paradox is unsettling. You see yourself as independent, mature, fully formed. Yet beneath this confident image lies a quiet vulnerability, an unresolved narrative that holds power over you precisely because it remains hidden. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What if everything you believe to be fate, destiny, or luck is actually something deeper, a childhood wound repeating itself, desperately begging to be seen and healed? Now, as discomfort settles deep in your chest, you're forced to confront the question: are you really living your life, or simply reliving your childhood? The answer isn't simple. It's troubling, provocative, and deeply personal. But one thing is certain. Until you understand this invisible force shaping your reality, you'll never fully control who you become. To unravel this mystery, we must journey deeper, into the shadows of your psyche, into places long ignored and forgotten. Because your life today isn't just shaped by who you are now, it's profoundly shaped by who you once were. And who you once were still controls you in ways you can scarcely imagine. Beneath the surface of your daily choices lies a quiet, hidden force, one you've likely underestimated your entire life. Your childhood isn't just a distant memory. It's a living, breathing entity inside your psyche, continually shaping your identity, emotions, and reactions. Carl Jung understood this profoundly, believing the child you once were doesn't vanish into adulthood but retreats into the shadowy corners of your unconscious. There, hidden from conscious awareness, it quietly influences your decisions, your relationships, your fears, and even your dreams. Yet society sells you the myth of adulthood as liberation, the fantasy that once you turn 18 or reach some arbitrary milestone, your past simply evaporates. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the seductive lie of self-sufficiency, asserting that individuals carry within themselves an inner landscape forged by early wounds, fears, and insecurities. According to Nietzsche, the so-called strength you project might just be a mask to hide vulnerabilities you refuse to acknowledge, vulnerabilities first planted in childhood when you had no control, no choice, no real agency. Consider this unsettling truth. Many adults spend their lives unconsciously reacting to early traumas, neglect, criticism, rejection, yet rarely realize it. A parent's harsh words still echo quietly, shaping your self-worth decades later. The subtle absence of emotional validation from childhood now translates into your adult struggle for approval, recognition, and love. You chase external validation obsessively, driven by the insatiable hunger of a child whose needs were never fully met. Arthur Schopenhauer described human existence as a perpetual struggle, driven by unconscious desires and compulsions we rarely understand. For him, life was an endless chase toward elusive goals set unconsciously by early experiences of suffering and inadequacy. Your ambitions, anxieties, and patterns, are they really your own, or were they silently imposed by a childhood narrative that you never questioned? Modern psychology confirms this philosophical intuition. Viktor Frankl noted how early experiences imprint meaning into your mind, guiding your sense of purpose and self-concept. Children who grow up feeling abandoned or powerless often develop an inner narrative of inadequacy or unworthiness. Frankl observed that these unconscious stories become self-fulfilling prophecies. Without realizing it, you continually recreate familiar situations that confirm your early beliefs about yourself, repeating painful cycles simply because they're comfortable, even in their misery. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, foresaw how conditioning, whether societal or familial, creates invisible prisons. He warned that your sense of identity, happiness, and freedom could easily be illusions, subtly crafted by environments you didn't choose. Just as Huxley's characters believed they lived freely, you too might believe you act independently, while in reality, you're subtly guided by patterns ingrained during childhood conditioning. Society applauds conformity, making it dangerously easy to ignore the uncomfortable truth about your real motives. Yet, the greatest danger isn't simply that childhood shapes your adult identity. The true danger is your ignorance of this reality, because what remains hidden wields more power than what's known. Jean-Paul Sartre asserted that the ultimate human responsibility is awareness, confronting the uncomfortable truths you'd rather ignore. To Sartre, you're not only free to choose your life, but forced to bear the responsibility of confronting the invisible forces that shape your decisions. Ignoring this duty leads to what he called bad faith, a life of perpetual denial, self-deception, and quiet desperation. Why, then, does childhood trauma or conditioning have such enduring power? Because early experiences mold your emotional brain during its most impressionable phase. Neuroscience reveals that during childhood, the brain is hypersensitive to emotional input, wiring itself according to experiences of security, attachment, fear, or abandonment. Those early neural pathways become your default emotional responses in adulthood, automatically triggered before your conscious mind can even intervene. Your emotions today, fear of rejection, anxiety about abandonment, anger toward perceived slights, aren't just isolated feelings. They're echoes, emotional reflexes created long ago, shaped by the hands of those who raised you, loved you, or wounded you. They persist because your mind's survival instinct tries desperately to protect you from experiencing similar pain again, even if this protective instinct now imprisons rather than protects. But here's the disturbing paradox. Your unconscious mind, desperate to shield you, becomes the architect of your ongoing suffering. You feel trapped, anxious, reactive, not because you're weak, flawed, or broken, but because your inner child, locked within the unconscious, still cries out for attention, validation, and healing. You might wonder, with increasing dread, if your childhood still controls you, who is truly steering your life? And if you never consciously confront this hidden influence, are you doomed to endlessly repeat patterns of pain and frustration? To break free, you must first acknowledge the invisible chains binding you to your past. But what exactly happens if you fail to face this uncomfortable truth? What are the unseen consequences that silently shape every aspect of your existence? To answer that, we must journey deeper into the hidden reality that quietly dictates your choices, relationships, and even your sense of self. Because the price of ignorance is greater than you dare to imagine. Every decision you make, every relationship you form, every self-doubt or success you experience carries the invisible imprint of your childhood. You might believe your adult life is governed purely by reason and conscious choice, yet beneath your carefully curated image lies a hidden narrative quietly directing your path. The consequences of ignoring this reality are profound, and they ripple through every aspect of your existence. Consider your relationships. Perhaps you often find yourself attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable, distant, or even hurtful. You convince yourself it's bad luck, fate, or just modern dating. But what if these repetitive experiences aren't random at all? Carl Jung revealed this unsettling truth through the concept of the shadow, the suppressed parts of yourself formed by early childhood wounds. This shadow silently leads you into situations that mirror unresolved traumas, compelling you to confront pain you consciously avoid. You might repeatedly pursue romantic partners who replicate your parents' emotional patterns, not because you're seeking happiness, but because your unconscious mind desperately wants closure. This explains why you sabotage relationships that feel too safe or healthy. They threaten your familiar narrative of being unloved or misunderstood. Until you recognize this hidden pattern, you're doomed to endlessly repeat these cycles, blaming fate instead of facing your inner truth. But the impact isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Neuroscience confirms that childhood experiences shape your brain's development, creating pathways that hardwire automatic emotional responses. Stressful or traumatic experiences in childhood increase sensitivity to anxiety and fear, embedding reactive responses deep within your nervous system. As an adult, your brain perceives threats everywhere, even when none exist, triggering anxiety attacks, chronic stress, or inexplicable sadness. Your body, in essence, lives as though your childhood wounds are still fresh, perpetually reacting to dangers that disappeared long ago. Cognitive biases reinforce this cycle. Confirmation bias leads you to unconsciously seek evidence that reinforces negative childhood narratives. If your inner child believes you're unworthy or unlovable, you'll constantly interpret ambiguous interactions as rejection. A friend's busy schedule becomes evidence of abandonment. An offhand comment confirms your inadequacy. The cycle is self-sustaining. Childhood beliefs shape perceptions, perceptions reinforce beliefs, and soon you're trapped in a distorted reality crafted decades ago. Now, zoom out and see the societal picture. Entire cultures are quietly shaped by collective unresolved childhood traumas. Societies that prioritize emotional suppression, hyperachievement, or relentless competition reflect unhealed collective wounds. Generational pain passed silently from parent to child. Aldous Huxley warned that modern society uses distraction, entertainment, workaholism, superficial pleasures to numb individuals to their hidden emotional realities. Distracted societies breed emotionally numb citizens, unaware of the unconscious forces driving their compulsive consumption, addiction, or aggression. Consider addiction, not just to substances, but to approval, status, social media, or entertainment. Gabor Mate reveals addiction as an attempt to soothe the deep emotional pain carried from childhood, pain often rooted in experiences of neglect, rejection, or emotional abandonment. The compulsive scrolling through your phone or the endless pursuit of success isn't merely habit. It's a desperate attempt by your inner child to fill emotional voids that were never acknowledged. Addiction, then, becomes a lifelong search for something external to ease an internal emptiness that originated decades earlier. Even your self-image isn't immune. You might see yourself as confident, ambitious, or independent, yet deep inside, that confidence often masks insecurity rooted in childhood. Nietzsche famously described modern individuals as desperately striving for external validation to cover inner emptiness. Emptiness first formed in childhood when you learned your true self wasn't enough to earn love or acceptance. Your ambition, while praised by society, might actually be an unconscious effort to finally prove yourself worthy of love. But without confronting its root cause, no amount of achievement can heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge. Perhaps the greatest consequence is existential. You risk living a life that's never truly your own. Jean-Paul Sartre warned of the existential despair caused by living inauthentically, constantly driven by unseen forces rather than conscious choices. Without self-awareness, your life becomes a reaction to invisible emotional triggers, never authentically chosen but always compulsively reenacted. You pursue career paths, relationships, or lifestyles that society applauds, but which leave your true self feeling empty, anxious, or depressed, because deep down, you know you're living someone else's life, shaped by wounds you never consciously examined. The price of ignoring your childhood's silent influence is heavy, emotionally, neurologically, relationally, and existentially. Your past silently shapes your present and future, robbing you of true freedom, authenticity, and peace. This realization is painful, yet essential. Awareness is uncomfortable precisely because it strips away comforting illusions you've held for decades. You stand now at a crossroads. Will you remain trapped in unconscious patterns, forever chasing shadows, or will you take the risk to rebel against these invisible chains, reclaiming control of your life? The path toward freedom begins with rebellion, an inner revolution against patterns you didn't create but have blindly followed. But how do you break free from this invisible prison? How can you confront your hidden self, heal your inner child, and reclaim your lost autonomy? To answer this, we must journey into radical rebellion, a courageous confrontation with everything you thought you knew about yourself. Because true freedom lies not in changing your external reality, but in radically transforming your inner world. The truth you've uncovered is powerful, yet unsettling. Your childhood quietly holds the reins of your adult life, guiding your decisions, fears, and desires from the shadows. But acknowledging this hidden control is only the beginning. Now comes the moment to rebel, not against the outside world, but against the invisible patterns rooted deep within your psyche. This rebellion isn't just an act of defiance, it's a radical reclamation of your identity, your freedom, and your authentic self. To initiate this rebellion, you must first embrace a counterintuitive truth. Your wounds are not weaknesses, they're entry points to transformation. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the courageous journey inward to confront and integrate your shadow, those forgotten or suppressed parts of yourself created during childhood. Instead of running from the past, Jung encouraged turning toward it, courageously facing precisely what you fear most. The shadow, when acknowledged, no longer controls you, but empowers you. Imagine for a moment your childhood self standing in front of you, vulnerable, confused, perhaps frightened. The wounds that child suffered have silently influenced your entire adult life, begging for recognition, healing, and validation. Rebellion begins by consciously embracing this inner child, not with resentment or denial, but with radical compassion and understanding. Viktor Frankl emphasized that between stimulus and response lies a space. Your freedom to choose your reaction. Your childhood wounds remain powerful only if you unconsciously react to them. Once you bring them into consciousness, their grip weakens dramatically. Practically speaking, rebellion demands rigorous self-awareness. Notice your reactions in everyday life, your anger, anxiety, jealousy, or insecurity, and pause to ask yourself, what childhood experience is this emotion secretly echoing? This practice isn't easy, it's uncomfortable, even painful. But every time you bravely look inward, asking why you respond as you do, you reclaim power previously surrendered to unconscious habits. The moment you identify these patterns, they lose their automatic force over your actions. Next, challenge your personal narrative. Friedrich Nietzsche famously stated, "Become who you are," urging individuals to rebel against the narratives imposed upon them. Society or family might have convinced you you're weak, inadequate, selfish, or unworthy. Yet, Nietzsche argued these labels are illusions, chains created by others but willingly carried by you. To break free, you must question everything you've been taught to believe about yourself. Is your identity genuinely yours or merely a conditioned response crafted during childhood? Each belief you hold should be ruthlessly examined, its origin questioned, its validity challenged. Another powerful tool of rebellion is recontextualizing your past. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre insisted your past does not define your future unless you allow it. While you cannot change what happened, you hold absolute power over its meaning. Childhood trauma or conditioning doesn't have to signify lifelong victimhood. It can instead represent your strength, resilience, or courage. This reinterpretation transforms suffering into power. When you consciously rewrite your story, you're no longer controlled by a helpless child's perspective, but empowered by an adult's clarity. History offers countless examples of individuals who shattered their conditioning through conscious rebellion. Consider Dostoevsky's profound insight. Humans have an extraordinary capacity to reinvent themselves through radical self-awareness and empathy. Dostoevsky himself overcame profound trauma, addiction, and despair precisely because he confronted his deepest wounds openly, honestly, and fearlessly. Like Dostoevsky, you too can reclaim your narrative, not by denying the past, but by confronting and transforming it. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer warned that true freedom requires courage, the courage to reject familiar suffering for uncertain self-discovery. Ironically, many people cling to their painful patterns because familiarity feels safer than facing the unknown. But breaking free demands the willingness to venture into uncertainty. Your rebellion is a journey into unexplored territory where you encounter hidden parts of yourself. Yes, it's frightening, but this is precisely what makes it revolutionary. It marks the point where you finally reclaim autonomy. Ultimately, rebellion leads to integration. You don't destroy your past, you integrate it. You don't discard your inner child, you heal it. Your wounds transform from scars of shame into badges of courage, wisdom, and strength. The end goal isn't perfection or erasure of pain, but self-understanding, achieving wholeness by embracing your complexity, your contradictions, your humanity. When this happens, you discover something revolutionary. Your childhood no longer controls you, it empowers you. Your old wounds become sources of empathy, resilience, and insight. Your shadow, once feared, becomes your greatest ally. You finally stop repeating unconscious patterns, instead choosing your reactions consciously. and for the first time, you begin living a life truly your own. But there's one final revelation, an ultimate truth that not only transforms your understanding, but redefines reality itself. You've journeyed from unconscious victimhood to conscious rebellion. Yet, to fully reclaim your freedom, you must face one final, profound realization, an insight so powerful that once embraced, your life will never again be the same. To grasp this ultimate truth, we must now step even deeper into the heart of your reality, where your entire perception of life and identity will shift forever. At the heart of this journey, beyond shadows, wounds, rebellions, and transformations, lies one final, profoundly unsettling truth. You have always been your own creator. The child within you who suffered, who was shaped by pain and limitation, is not merely a victim or passive observer, but the co-author of your entire reality. You aren't just responding to past experiences, you are continually recreating them. Recognizing this is simultaneously terrifying and liberating, because it means your freedom, authenticity, and identity are always just one conscious choice away. Imagine yourself standing on the edge of an abyss. Behind you lies everything you've ever known: the comforting familiarity of old patterns, the predictable safety of your wounds. Ahead lies the unknown, a future without scripts, narratives, or predetermined paths. This abyss represents pure potential, terrifying in its uncertainty, but thrilling in its possibility. Nietzsche famously proclaimed, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss gazes back into you. The ultimate truth is precisely this. The abyss staring back is your true self, limitless, free, and terrifyingly powerful. Your childhood wounds, traumas, and conditioning were not meaningless suffering. They were invitations. Deeply hidden, yes, but invitations nonetheless, to awaken your authentic self. Carl Jung understood this clearly, suggesting your greatest suffering holds within it the keys to your highest potential. The shadow, the inner child, your buried pain, these aren't obstacles to your growth. They're precisely what catalyzes your transformation. Each wound you've carried silently within you holds the exact lesson required for your liberation. But here's the real paradox. To become fully free, you must surrender your identity as a victim. You must abandon the comfort of blaming parents, circumstances, society, or fate. Sartre, who fiercely advocated existential freedom, asserted that your life has meaning precisely because it's your creation. You are, at every moment, radically free to rewrite your narrative, to reclaim your power, to redefine yourself completely. Yet, this freedom terrifies most people because with total freedom comes total responsibility. You alone become accountable for your happiness, identity, and destiny. This truth is exhilarating, but also deeply frightening. The most profound realization of all is that freedom is never found externally. You won't discover it in achievement, relationships, or validation. Freedom is an internal awakening, the realization that you have always held the keys to your prison. Your childhood doesn't control you because it's powerful. It controls you because you've unconsciously allowed it to. Your unconscious mind has been faithfully replaying patterns to protect you from uncertainty, pain, or abandonment. But when you consciously choose awareness, when you face the abyss and realize the shadow is you reclaim the ultimate authority over your existence. This shift changes everything. Relationships become authentic expressions of choice, not unconscious repetitions of childhood patterns. Emotions are no longer feared, suppressed, or uncontrollable. They become guides offering wisdom about yourself. Your past ceases to be an oppressive force holding you hostage and instead becomes your greatest teacher, imparting lessons of strength, compassion, and resilience. Even suffering takes on meaning, transformed from meaningless pain into profound growth. Yet, reaching this ultimate truth demands radical honesty. You must accept your complicity, not as guilt, shame, or blame, but as empowerment. Viktor Frankl said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." Your childhood happened exactly as it did. You cannot rewrite that past. But the meaning you give it, how you allow it to shape you, remains entirely within your control. Your freedom isn't in avoiding the abyss, but in courageously stepping into it, embracing uncertainty, and reclaiming power over your life's meaning. Consider finally this ultimate insight. The person you are becoming is far greater than the person shaped by childhood limitations. Every moment you choose consciously, rather than react unconsciously, you transcend past wounds. You embody Nietzsche's vision of self-overcoming, moving beyond resentment, victimhood, and blame into profound authenticity and power. Your life isn't defined by what happened to you, it's defined by how consciously you choose to respond. You aren't chained to your childhood. You're empowered by the wisdom it provided. The shadows that haunted you become the foundation of your strength. The child within you, once frightened and helpless, is now seen, validated, and healed. Together, you and that child step boldly toward freedom, no longer victimized by circumstance but empowered by choice. And as you stand at the edge of this profound realization, you sense the world shifting beneath your feet. You finally understand the words of Dostoevsky. The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for. Your purpose becomes clear. It's not simply to survive your past, but to consciously shape your future, choosing freedom, authenticity, and love despite all pain you've endured. Now, as you look into that abyss, a quiet peace emerges from deep within. You understand fully, perhaps for the first time, that the abyss isn't emptiness, it's infinite possibility. It invites you, at last, to step forward, not as a wounded child reacting unconsciously to the past, but as a fully conscious creator of your own reality. And in that decisive moment, your childhood no longer controls you. You become, at last, truly and beautifully free.